we're going to go ahead and get started here. Looks like folks are trickling in. We'll continue to let folks in, and if project team, if you could help me keep an eye out and let folks in as they join us. Hi there, my name is Dave Javid with Plan to Place. Thanks so much for joining us here on a Saturday morning. This is our community meeting regarding the Diridon Station area and the development agreement that recently came out. So we really appreciate your time and being here with us today. Before we get started, I'm going to ask our interpreters, as we typically do, to read this slide, and then we're going to open up a room both in Spanish and in Vietnamese for folks that would like to join in those languages. So I'm going to ask Vincent to read this first half, please.
Sure. La interpretación en simultáneo para esta reunión se dará en los siguientes idiomas. En español por Ana y Vincent, bajo la opción de español. Por favor, haz clic en el icono Interpretation en la barra de herramientas para acceder al idioma deseado. Nota, la presentación está disponible en español y vietnamita. Vaya a la página www.diridonsj.org/SAG y descargue la presentación para verla en su idioma preferido.
Excellent, thank you, Vincent. And Quy, if you could read the Vietnamese, please.
Yes. Phiên dịch đồng thời cho cuộc họp này sẽ được cung cấp bằng các ngôn ngữ sau: tiếng Việt, Kỳ Anh và Quý, theo tùy chọn tiếng Việt. Vui lòng nhấp vào biểu tượng Interpretation trên thanh công cụ của bạn để truy cập ngôn ngữ mong muốn. Lưu ý, trình chiếu có sẵn bằng tiếng Tây Ban Nha và tiếng Việt. Truy cập diridonsj.org và tải xuống bản trình bày để theo dõi bằng ngôn ngữ ưa thích của bạn.
Excellent. Thank you, Quy and Vincent. And with that, I'm going to ask James to open up those two rooms, and then we'll get started. James, just give me the heads up when we're all set. Thanks for your patience. I just want to make sure we get the interpreters in those rooms before we launch into the presentation. James, are we good to go?
Almost there. There was a IT issue right now. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Thanks for your patience, all. Going to get these rooms set up and launch right into the presentation. James, let me know if I could help out.
Okay, it's open.
It is, okay, great. Excellent. So before we get started, we're gonna be doing a couple live polls just to kind of get a sense of who's in the room, but actually I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Nancy Klein to do the welcome and get us started. So Nancy, over to you.
Thank you so very much, Dave. It's a real pleasure to get to be here today. This has been a long journey for all of us together, and I want to note that truly the words, the thoughts, the direction and guidance from the community have made a difference, have become the reflection of what we've done in the community benefits, in the development agreement, and in the project itself. And that really is a tremendous achievement for all of us together. What you'll find as we walk you through this information is that the community benefits are totally focused 100% on equity-based activities. Most community benefits or development agreement plans include large expenditures on parks and open space, sustainability, local hire, which are all great things. And those are included in this. You will see that. But beyond that is a pure $200 million to be targeted to the community and spent exclusively on those who have faced displacement, homelessness, and economic challenge. And the dollars will be determined by those with lived experience and those who are experts in the services serving those who've had challenge. So I think together we have all listened to each other and we've really made a difference. And I'm hoping that at the end of this, we'll hear how you think about that and that you too will find that it's a good package. So looking forward to giving the presentation, but hearing, more importantly, hearing what you're thinking. With that, I'll turn it back over, Dave. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nancy. And I just want to note, like, this shows the staff in attendance today that you'll actually be seeing as we move into the small groups exercise we'll talk about here shortly. We also have members of community partners who've been a great extension of the project team to help bring people to the table and different voices to the table. So it's great to have them here with us today as well. They'll be helping facilitate the small group discussions as we move into that. So with that, there will be a presentation up front on the Downtown West Project Development Agreement, just to give you all an overview of how that came together and the different components. Then, as I mentioned, we're going to break out into small groups. So we'll have a chance to really hear from you, which is the most important part of today's session. And then once we get through about 45 minutes of discussion, we're also going to leave about 15 minutes to do a report out. So we'll all come back together here in this room, be able to hear what the conversations were in the other rooms. And then we're going to do a quick wrap up, answer any following questions, and talk a little bit about next steps before we send you all on your way, hopefully right around noon. So before we launch in though, I'd like to do a quick poll, just again to get a quick sense of demographics of who's joining us here today. And then also to ask a quick question about what topics you're interested in. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll now. And I'm hoping you all see it on your screen now. If you could help answer these questions in the next 30 seconds or so, that would be great. Very simple questions about where do you live, age, gender, ethnicity. Again, just to get a quick sense of who's joining us here today from the community. Thank you all. And I do see a hand raised. If we'll get to questions here shortly. I'm just going to kind of get through this first section, Tessa, and then we'll definitely get to questions. So thanks for your patience. All right, looks like we got pretty much a good chunk of folks in. I'm going to go ahead and share out the results. If you all could see that now. We'll get a quick synopsis of the breakout. Looks like half of folks joining us here today live near the Diridon station area, as expected. Cross section of ages, genders, and ethnicity. So one other poll I wanted to do real quickly before we launch in was to get a sense of project familiarity and interest and what topics you might be most interested in as we start to kind of get into the small group discussions. So I'm going to launch that poll now. Hopefully you all see it in front of you. Same thing, just a couple questions here. If you could help answer, that would be excellent. This is really to understand if you've participated in meetings over the past few years. And then again, which topic that you might be most interested in. And that'll kind of help us as we move into the small groups to get a better sense of where that discussion might go. So I might just give it 10 more seconds here. Okay. Looks like we almost got everyone. Maybe just 5 more seconds to make sure you all have a chance to weigh in. And again, this isn't critical. There'll be plenty of opportunity to talk to this as we get into small groups. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll now. Share that out with you all. And great, it looks like well over a half of you have been to at least 3 events in the past. So have a general sense of the project and where it's headed. Maybe a quarter of you haven't participated in the past. So this is a great opportunity to get up to speed and provide your input. It looks like about half of you are very interested in anti-displacement and community stabilization and or affordable housing. So we'll really have a chance to talk about that here tonight as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing the results. And I think we're going to go ahead and launch into the presentation, and then we'll definitely come back to questions as we move into the small groups. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rosalind.
Thank you so much, Dave, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with all of you this morning. We have some really exciting information to share with you as we're coming to the finish line of our work together with you on the Downtown West project. So next slide. So just a quick context setting. I think we're all very familiar of the area that we've been discussing the last 2 years. As a reminder, the Diridon, the Downtown West development proposal consists of about 80 acres that's actually located within the Diridon station area, which is roughly 250 acres. Next slide. So this slide shows illustrative massing of what the development program is for the Downtown West project. And that includes about 7.3 million square feet of office space, 4,000 homes, 500 square feet of active uses. And by that, we mean retail space, arts and cultural space, and opportunities for educational uses. And the project also includes about 15 acres of parks, plazas, and open spaces. Next slide. So really, what's been so important in our work with you is all of us coming together about the vision that we have for the Diridon Station area and specifically for the Downtown West project. And that really is focused on vibrancy, a welcoming area, accessible by everyone in our community, and that includes a mix of uses. And really, our vision has been based in a commitment to placemaking, social equity, advancing our economic development goals, and really making sure that we are developing an area that is sustainable environmentally, socially, and economically. Next slide. So the project has consistent of 3 pathways for city review. And the first one is the development review process, which includes things like design standards, the rezoning, city policy analyses, amendments to the general plan and the Diridon Station area plan. The second pathway is the environmental review process, which included a preparation of an environmental impact report and a full analysis of impacts in the area. The environmental review process also includes a mitigation monitoring and reporting program. And then thirdly, the development agreement, which has been a negotiation of community benefits and other terms of development to give both the city and Google certainty around the benefits that we all wanted to see for the project. Next slide. So a lot of activity has been going forward in the Diridon Station area plan, and many of these plans and projects have been happening simultaneously. So I know that many of us have been involved in the Diridon Integrated Station Concept Plan. And that work is about what the transportation services is going to look like over the long term with the various rail projects that are ongoing. The Downtown Transportation Plan has also been part of the process, a parallel process. Of course, we have been working with the community and amending the 2014 Diridon Station area plan. And of course, all of this has been happening as we have been reviewing the Downtown West project. Next slide. So again, just a review of the parallel processes with the development project, the Diridon Station Area Plan Amendment, as well as the Diridon Affordable Housing Implementation Plan. So all of this work has been going on simultaneously, and we're now headed to our public hearings this spring, very shortly. We are set for a public hearing with the Planning Commission later this month, and then final consideration by our City Council later in the spring. Next slide. So all of this work has required extensive community engagement, and we wanted it to make sure that it was coordinated over these last 2+ years. So just as a reminder, I mean, this Station Area Advisory Group was first established back in 2018. The City Council approved the Memorandum of Understanding with Google late that year. Throughout the process, you know, we've talked about work on the Diridon Integrated Station Concept Plan. In late 2019, Google actually submitted their development proposal, Downtown West. Last year, even though we were all responding to the COVID pandemic, we were actually still able to do quite a bit of engagement around the Diridon Station Area Plan Amendment. And then last fall, the project, the Downtown West project, we released the Environmental Impact Report, which is a key component of the project, as well as the Diridon Affordable Housing Implementation Plan. Next slide. So as I mentioned, there has been extensive community engagement over these past 2+ years, and just a variety of ways to meet with the community. Obviously, we have met many times with the SOG group. There have been multiple community members, and we've really community meetings, and we've been really excited for the opportunity to partner with community-based organizations who really have those very deep relationships in many of our communities. So we've partnered with them, and they're here today to really do extensive engagement with many of our community residents. And we've tried different types of tools, such as online surveys. We have conducted pop-up events over the years. We've had virtual office hours with city staff, and again, just multiple opportunities for engagement. Next slide. I'm now going to pass it over to Nancy Klein, who is going to walk us through the MOU and community benefits.
Thank you very much, Rosalind. These goals, for those of you that have been in prior meetings, hopefully will look a little familiar. In December of 2018, an MOU was approved by the City Council for a broad range of goals that are hoped for aspirationally to be included in the project. And we've achieved this. And of course, that's for you to say. We're working on a balanced development, pursuing equitable development, designing for human scale, optimizing sustainability, and of course, community engagement, and many others. Next slide, please. What the MOU said, the SOG said, and what we heard from you many times about what is most important: affordable housing and anti-displacement, top 10. That's such an incredible focus on making sure we're tending to affordable housing and how to make sure this area is a place for all, and people who are living in the area don't have to leave there, or people who have different incomes can afford to live there. The goal was that 25% in the DSAP, in the Diridon Station Area Plan, should be living or available for affordable housing in different affordability levels. And this project, Downtown West, took on that goal and achieves it. The approach for affordable housing should include production, new housing, preservation, so that we're keeping in that are currently affordable units to lock that in, and protection of people, as well as developing a city-wide strategy for residential anti-displacement and an implementation plan for the Diridon Station area. The Housing Department has led those two efforts, and Rachel Vanderveen is going to talk to you more about those in a little bit. Next slide, please. On economic opportunity, the biggest idea here is a real recognition by everybody that housing and economic opportunity go hand in hand. You can't decouple them, and we shouldn't. We should strive to say there should be affordable housing as well as good paying jobs. Access for youth and adults through scholarships, career exploration, small business support, and looking at how to have progressive hiring practices. And to pay construction workers a prevailing hourly wage. Just a quick note on that. It's estimated that 5,700 jobs in construction will be associated with the project, and that the payroll associated with the 5,700 jobs will be over $1 billion itself. Next slide, please. And I'll turn that over to Nicole. Oops. Right? Parks and open space, right? Nicole.
I can do parks and open space for sure. So what we heard from the community about that absolutely was following up on what Nancy was saying in her previous slides with regard to parks and open space was strong interest in making sure the parks in this area connect throughout Diridon, but also into the surrounding neighborhoods. Robust amenities, parks, plazas, open space, and trails that are truly open for public use and public access, and that really help generate and create and support a lively public realm. And spaces that can be activated with temporary and also permanent programming. The other thing that we heard a lot about was about pursuing partnerships or some out-of-the-box ideas about how we can more effectively maintain these spaces and make sure that they are sustainable for the level of use that they will see from the high intensity of development and also from the uses around Diridon, and also to ensure these spaces are welcoming for all. So that's what we heard about parks, and you'll hear more about that in future slides as well.
So I'll jump in here. So my name is Lori Severino. I'm the Community Engagement Program Manager for the Diridon Station area. And so in terms of transportation, we heard a lot. We actually have 2 slides on this one. So the focus has really been on improving the area for people on foot and bicycling. Also, there's a strong interest in improving the connections between the station and the surrounding neighborhoods, as well as with the open space network. People would like us to really push the project to be ambitious when it comes to our targets for reducing car travel and increasing the ways in which people get around by modes other than car. And this involves being proactive about how we manage the parking supply. Next slide. And of course, there's very strong interest among the city and the public to make sure that people are able to get to SAP Center for events, and making sure that public transit is very functional and affordable, and that it works well for all types of users. And that we also should be focusing on how to be adaptable over time as technologies change and travel patterns change, and making sure the system can be updated accordingly. And there's also a consistent theme has been about connecting people across barriers like the freeways, especially when it comes to connecting to schools and parks south of 280 and addressing the Bird 280 interchange. And lastly, in terms of transportation, people would like us to focus on how to make sure the transportation system is safe and efficient during periods of construction. So next slide. And the last theme here we have is related to environmental sustainability. So we have heard from many community members that it's important that we push development in the Diridon area to really advance the city's sustainability goals, especially related to climate smart San Jose. And this could involve being a model for eco-district planning, as well as for getting LEED certification for the developments. And related to this is just people are interested in improving the ecology of Los Gatos Creek and Guadalupe River and improving that wildlife habitat and water quality. And not shown on these slides, but really something that's been a cross-cutting theme across all these topics has been equity. And so that's been very important to community members, that we are looking for ways in which this development and in the Diridon area and specifically downtown West can benefit all communities, especially disadvantaged communities and youth and people of color, and minimize impacts to people as well. And so that has been a very important theme that cuts across all these. It's not on a slide, but it's really embedded in all of the feedback we've been getting. And so next slide. So here I'm going to turn it back to Nancy Klein. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Lori. The hallmark of our project to date, and will continue to be, equitable development. And we created with the community a framework for this. Affordable housing production is one of the 4 pillars. Community stabilization, which really means anti-displacement in many forms that Rachel can touch on in more depth, and affordable housing preservation, opportunity pathways we were referring to earlier as education, jobs, training, and employment and small business opportunities for those who want to access jobs from Google, who are already in the area and want to take advantage of the new people who are going to be working and living in the area. And at the core, this is all about San Jose's residents and focusing on disadvantaged communities. Totally. Next slide. We've all the way through the project, we've shared with you that there are 3 ways there are public benefits channeled to the community from the project. The first line is the baseline set of city requirements, and many of you have come to city meetings on many projects, and you know that there's a baseline inclusion of affordable housing when it's appropriate, streetscapes, perhaps parks, and this project too has a robust baseline of requirements that are baked into the project. In the community benefits section, what you'll hear more of, you've heard a little bit, is this is the negotiated piece. And what we're sharing today is that there's a $200 million amount that is focused on equity and disadvantaged communities. You'll hear a little bit more, but I'll start sharing now that a large part of the community benefits is a fund which will specifically work in the areas of affordable housing and in opportunity pathways. And the groundbreaking first time ever work there is that the decisions on the $155 million will come from the community. They'll be guided by those with lived experience and those who serve the communities that are in the disadvantaged communities we're talking about. And then lastly, there's project features that will benefit the public, whether it's art that Google includes or additional green space, open space trails that will be open to the public, that is included in the overall project. Altogether, those 3 areas are sources of public benefits. Next slide. Rachel, are you jumping in on this one?
I am. Thank you, Nancy. Hello, everyone. My name is Rachel Vanderveen, and I'm the Deputy Director of the city's Housing Department. And I'm going to be providing an overview for you of the different aspects related to housing in our in the Downtown West project. The proposed development includes 4,000 new housing units and 7.3 million square feet of office space. In order to meet the city's requirements under both the inclusionary housing ordinance and the commercial linkage fee, Google will be dedicating 3 sites to the city for affordable housing development. They will be building 170 moderate income housing units dispersed within the housing that is built, and will be paying $87 million in commercial linkage fees. Additionally, Google will dedicate a 4th site for affordable housing development at the beginning of the development process. And this is actually considered a community benefit because it goes beyond what's required under our laws. Google will also be providing an additional 30 moderate income units, bring the total number of moderate units to 200 across the development. The value of the 4 sites for affordable housing development, 200 moderate income units, and the commercial linkage fee payments all total $183 million in affordable housing contributions, which pave the way for 1,000 affordable units to be built across the entire development. Next slide, please. This image shows the proposed development with housing colored in tan across the site. The 200 moderate units will be incorporated in the housing development as it's built. And the 4 sites dedicated for affordable housing are indicated with a darker shade of tan, and the Autumn Street site is called out on the right side of the image. You can see that the affordable housing will be spread throughout the entire proposed project. And one of the interesting and exciting components of this is that the Autumn Street site will be dedicated very early in this process and will give us an opportunity to get shovels in the ground and get working on affordable housing right away as soon as we can. So that concludes my portion of the presentation, and I will turn it back to Nancy.
Thank you, Rachel, very, very much. So as mentioned in just a little bit ago, 154.8 million will be dedicated to a new community stabilization and opportunities pathway fund. That is equivalent to $21.20 per gross square foot of the office, and the office is intended to yield 7.3 million square feet across the project. The grants will be from the 155 roughly $1 million will be allocated to programs over time through the community-led process I was referencing, and we'll also tell you a little bit more about in a second. Part of additional dollars, in addition to the 155 million, will be an early payment of 7.5 million to the city, and there'll be a potential range of things for anti-displacement or jobs that the council will determine what those dollars are spent on. But the point is, those dollars will come very early in the project so that we can get to work on anti-displacement efforts and or the other types of services and programs the council will direct us to move forward on. Next slide. The goals and objectives of stabilization are to minimize displacement and maximize opportunities for local youth and adults. We're going to use a lot of tracking and a lot of data, trying to make sure we're using a very smart approach to support the Community Advisory Committee, and that we'll be tracking what's being done and what's working so that there'll be flexibility to grow as experience and thinking lead to better and better, that's the intention, practices. We'll be concentrating on communities that have historically been affected by structural racism, where the risk of displacement is the highest. Again, we'll focus on measurable outcomes, and we'll look to get to root causes of displacement and move economic mobility forward and to advance racial equity. Next slide, please. Again, just a little bit more, because this is a lot of information. We recognize that the community stabilization piece would be, as you read here, programs and services to prevent displacement and help serve the homeless, and have innovative housing research, for example, in pre-development about a possible land trust in the area, which the community has consistently told us is important to everyone. And then opportunity pathways would be the programs and services for adults and youth for college, post-secondary scholarships, career exploration for middle and high school youth, and also early childhood education, along with small business and entrepreneurial support. Next slide, please. Highlighting here the community-driven process objectives. We want to create a new model for decision-making. It came loud and clear that the community wants to be able to directly be involved or make these decisions about how these dollars are spent. So it's all about empowering residents of impacted communities to grow and share their voice. And then we also want very much to bridge lived experience with those of local leaders directly engaged in providing these services. So we cannot, just as a note here, there is not another fund in California or anywhere that we have found that actually puts the decision-making in the committee of this nature. Usually the committees that we explored would make recommendations, which would then go back to council. So that's very different in this situation. And then it's really important for us to provide a clear data-driven framework for establishing and evaluating what we're doing together. There'll be checks and balances and transparency so that the community knows exactly what the dollars are being spent on and what the outcomes are. And again, it's important not to lock the committee into a certain set of programs or structure, because things will change over time. So that we find to be super innovative and comes directly from listening to what the community wants. Next slide, please. The committee, just to give you a bit more explanation here, the proposed committee would be 13 people, 5 with lived experience and 8 with technical expertise. All of them must live in or own a business in San Jose, have a history of conducting work in San Jose in relevant related areas, or otherwise have a meaningful connection to San Jose, preferably in these areas. Everyone on the committee will demonstrate a commitment to furthering the city's goals of anti-displacement, workforce development, etc. And we'll strive to have the committee collectively reflect the racial and economic, generational, and other diversity factors of San Jose. The city of San Jose will not have a voting member on this committee. The city will have 3 advisory representatives. Google and potentially other funders will have an advisory role, but again, not a decision-making role. And we do intend to create the fund such that others will want to invest in it. So it's not a Google fund and it's not a city fund. It'll be focused on the outcomes to support the community. Next slide. This gives you in a picture, because pictures are often so helpful, how do we think this is going to evolve? 1, the city will adopt an ordinance that creates the Community Advisory Committee. The council will appoint the members that are based on the criteria we just went through together. And then the council with the committee will select a third-party fund manager. The fund manager is someone who will have an entity who will have extensive experience in working with communities on raising dollars and making grants in these areas. And together, the committee and the council and the third-party fund manager will build together an initial strategic plan for a 5-year plan. That will get council approval. That will set out the goals and broad brushstrokes of what efforts over the next 5 years the fund will pursue. And then the fund manager works directly with the committee to prepare RFPs for grants, administer grant application, and go through an evaluation process. If anyone's familiar with the arts grants the city does, this is super familiar because this is how this activity, the arts grants from the TOT, Transit Occupancy Tax, works. This piece is proven successful in many other examples. The fund manager through that process will recommend, based on the criteria that the committee and is embedded in the documents, they will send to the committee the list of grants that will be considered for approval by the committee itself. And then finally, the committee approves the grants. There's no double check on that. The committee approves the grants. Next slide, please. In addition to everything you saw there about the fund, there will be prevailing wage for all on-site construction workers. We talked about the 5,700 expected jobs. In addition to that, Google has agreed to take on the local hire goal that the city sets for itself. So 30% minimum of all on-site construction will be from local folks and companies. Google will dedicate itself on an ongoing collaboration with Work to Future, which is our jobs consortium. And in addition to that, there'll be support for disadvantaged businesses in the construction, yes, but also in the vendors that are secured for ongoing contracts for the office buildings. So there'll be not only one-time jobs, but ongoing jobs. And of those, there'll be at least a 10% inclusion of disadvantaged businesses through that process. Google also participates very extensively in volunteerism and mentorship, and that tool will be focused also in San Jose. And there will be, as Google already does, career development workshops for underserved communities that will take place in an ongoing way in San Jose. And there'll be ongoing monitoring and reporting. What's being done on these areas on this slide, and what are the outcomes? Next slide. And then I'll turn this back to Nicole for a little bit more discussion on open space.
Sure. Thank you, Nancy. I'm Nicole Burnham. I'm a Deputy Director with the City Department of Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhood Services. I'm going to walk you through the open space concept for the project, which is shown on the screen here. The proposed concept calls for 15 acres of land that support public life in a variety of ways. This includes 4.8 acres of city dedicated space and 10.2 acres of project sponsored open space. The city dedicated acreage, the 4.8 acres, which is what's shown in the darkest green on this graphic that's in front of you, and approximately a half acre of space, that will be parks, as well as about a half acre of it will be used to construct off-street alignments of the Los Gatos Creek Trail, which was a key item we heard from both the community and from staff that completing this final section of the trail was critically important. The dedication and construction of these spaces offset the project's parkland obligation, which is a project requirement. The additional 10.2 acres of land that will be privately owned will consist of parks, natural spaces along Los Gatos Creek, mid-block passages, and semi-public open space. That 10.2 acres is project feature that are being provided in excess of the project's parkland obligation. And next slide. So looking a little more deeply at that 10.2 acres of project-sponsored open space, slightly more than 7 of it will be subject to a restrictive covenant that will ensure public access. Of that 7 acres, slightly more than 4 will be privately owned, publicly accessible park. The remaining 3 acres are associated with Los Gatos Creek and its riparian corridor, which provides access to nature and educational opportunities that are critical in the urban park system. The 4 acres of private park space will operate similar to city parks, but will be owned and maintained by Google, which obviously provides a benefit to us in terms of not needing general fund dollars to maintain and manage those spaces. There are operating hours, rules, and reservable areas for all of those spaces, and they're outlined in the development agreement. The remaining 3 acres of the 10.2 that's not subject to the restricted covenant serve as what are called in the development documents mid-block passages and semi-private open space. These are uses that will further enhance the public realm. Examples of this you can see it downtown right now along Paseo de San Antonio that connects Plaza de Cesar Chavez to San Jose State. So there's more detailed information about all of that in the project documents, but that's an overview. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric from DOT to provide the overview on transportation.
Thank you, Nicole. Yes, in terms of transportation, the development agreement sees $30 million in transportation improvements that we have specified through local transportation analysis. Some examples include some complete street treatments along the former Autumn Street, the Barack Obama Boulevard. Special attention being paid to crossing, as Lori mentioned, and in response to community comments, some of the barriers, the infrastructure barriers we see in and around the area, most notably the I-280 crossing into the Gardner neighborhood. The agreement also lends support to a range of transit projects in the station area and some other multimodal improvements, Osiré, among others. Next slide, please. Parking, as we all know, is a very important issue. It's a scarce resource. The way that this plan envisions accommodating a lot more development in the area without taking up a lot more space, frankly, is to use the parking spaces more judiciously with shared parking approaches. In terms of the residential development, parking will be rented or sold separately, so as we say, unbundled from the residential unit. And overall, we include an overall transportation demand management plan to really cohesively and holistically encourage other modes of transportation other than solo driving. And of course, we're also thinking very much about issues like spillover parking into neighboring areas. Next slide, please. In terms of some of the streets, this drawing here on the right gives you an idea of how we are really trying to make more efficient use of street space and to really think about how we can get the most out of it. Generally, a lot more attention to cohesive tree canopy, in many cases, much higher quality bicycle infrastructure, sidewalks as well, and also to support our city's goals in the area of climate, electric vehicle charging stations throughout. And again, with the notion of making better use of scarce space, some streets include dynamic lane management concepts. So at certain times of the day, perhaps a certain part of the street is, for parking, or maybe we have 2 lanes in one direction in the morning, and then in the afternoon, one of those lanes is given over to the other direction. Next slide, please. And then, of course, we all know what makes this one of the main attributes that makes this area so valuable, why it has attracted Google and other private investors, is the wealth of high capacity transit investments that converge at Diridon Station. So one of the key issues that we've worked on together with Google is to make sure that we have enough space for the station to accommodate future needs in terms of vehicle volumes. So there is some language about corridor preservation, as well as this is a long-term project, take many years to build out, and we want to make sure that the space that we need eventually in a decade or so, that it's not just wasted space, unused for that long period of time. So we have language about how interim uses will be accommodated, and then eventually the station plan, as many of you know, envisions raising the tracks. So we have some vision of creating some park space that will extend underneath those elevated tracks in the future. So that's all specified in the agreement. And with that, I believe I turn it over to Rosalind.
Great, thank you so much, Eric. So we wanted to share with the community how our goals for sustainability and ecology have been incorporated into the Downtown West project. We've heard how important this is for many of you. So first, in terms of city requirements, the project complies with the city's green building codes and other regulations. And as Eric has shared, a transportation demand management plan is a center of the project. And obviously there are other CEQA mitigations that the project is including. In terms of project features, there are over 4 acres of enhanced riparian habitat. The project will have net zero emissions for construction and operations over the long term. That's for about 30 years or more. The project includes over 2,200 new trees and 100% native plant palette. And the project includes replacement of the San Fernando Bridge to reduce flood risk. And as we've shared previously, the project will be all electric. Next slide. So Google has proposed a district systems within their 80-acre project. An infrastructure plan would include a microgrid for electrical distribution, water waste treatment with recycled water network, optional garbage and recycling collection to reduce solid waste, and district heating and cooling. And obviously there are many, many benefits to a district system, which include protection from rising utility costs, backup power for essential services during grid outages, making room for more green areas that enable access for physical activity and social gathering. And lastly, a renewable future relying on carbon-free energy. Next slide. In regards to historic preservation, which we have heard many comments from the community, how important it is to preserve our historic resources. And this was part of the MOU. We've heard many comments from the SAG and from the public as well. So the project delivers on several historic preservation objectives, including retaining and repurposing many of our resources, including the San Jose Water Company building, the Kearney Patent Works and Foundry, and the Ironworks building. The project incorporates relocation of Victorian bungalows on Julian Street, as well as the beloved Stevens Meat product sign. The project also salvages and incorporates the facade of the Sunlight Bakery building, and also relocates 3 other historic resources, including buildings on Autumn Street. Next slide, and I think I am turning it back over to Nancy.
Nancy, I think you might be muted. Thank you.
Sorry about that, Dave. Thank you. I really wanted just to say thank you for holding on and listening to all of this. We really are approaching the end. Community benefits, in determining them, the way we determine the amount is consistent throughout. We've said from the days of the MOU that the additional value, or a portion of the additional value that's created from council actions to the project, would be given back to the city. And there are a number of things that wouldn't be considered community benefits. CEQA development, those things that are project features, as mentioned earlier, is one of the 3 forms of public benefit, and costs to meet city standards. Next slide. The community benefits value you see here is a summary in numbers of what we've been talking about together. The Community Stabilization and Opportunity Fund is roughly $155 million. An additional 7.5 million will come forward shortly to the community after council is finally approved. Additional moderate income units. And then one of the things that I just wanted to highlight, there are 4 sites that will come to the city for affordable housing. And Rachel mentions 3 because those first 3 are associated with the basic requirements of affordable housing that must be used to fulfill their inclusionary housing goal obligation. But there'll also be a 4th site that also was on the map Rachel referenced, and that site is community benefit. It's not something that was part of the basic requirements. And that site also will come to the city shortly after final approval of the project. Sorry. Why this is important is housing as well as parks always struggle to get land. Land is super expensive. And without getting the land, we can't develop affordable housing or we can't develop parks. So to get the land, 4 sites spread out through the Downtown West project will help us tremendously make this successful. Embedded also wanted to mention within the 200 million is $22.3 million that the council will allocate, will direct those funds. The importance there is staff has done our best job at suggesting where dollars be targeted. And again, the Community Stabilization and Opportunity Fund will do that in a meaningful, ongoing way. But we know that the community will continue to give input to the council and that the council will direct where those final dollars should be going. Thank you. Next slide. The timing, the community fund, the $155 million comes over time, and it's triggered by the building of office buildings. The funds, like the program itself for commercial linkage fees, is targeted to temporary certificate of occupancy. And then, as mentioned, there'll be this early payment of 7.5 million for job readiness and community stabilization. The 30 additional moderate income units will come with market rate development and the land transfer 3 months after final approval. And again, that last bit of community benefit mentioned, the 22.3, will come to the city as the office gets built out. Next slide, please. We want to know that baked into the development agreement, we have the oversight and performance of all the things we've been talking about. So this is complicated and it's going to be over a long period of time. The development agreement potentially will be in effect for 30 years. It may well happen that the project builds out more quickly than that, but we will have a required annual review of what's going on and if the Downtown West project is meeting its obligations, and that will come to the Planning Commission. That's consistent with city plans and processes with development agreements. And while we can't force Google to build, we want to make sure that there are performance requirements. So there are milestones baked in. At 10 years, the company must have completed 2 million square feet of office or choose to pay the associated community benefit. Similarly, at 20 years, there's a target of 4 million gross square feet, also requiring the company to pay their share of community benefits if they have not built that amount of office to retain the vested rights of a development agreement. One other thing that's really important to us is that we all have done this project with Google. And in any development agreement, under certain instances, there are rights to transfer. Google could transfer to an affiliate of theirs, or they could sell to someone not affiliated. And we wanted to meter any possibility of selling the project so that no more than 40% of what has been constructed office square footage can be sold to another. Next slide. And this is a summary slide. I sort of call it the spark notes or the cliff notes of the development agreement. This is a summary of what we've gone over together, that the project, the Downtown West project, took on the goal that council appointed for the Diridon Station Area Plan as a whole. So this makes it possible for 25% affordable housing to be achieved. It exceeds the city's baseline. It supports production of 1,000 units. And just to mention, the intent that is going forward from staff is that 40 to 45%, that's the target, of the 1,000 units will be 30% AMI or less. That's the intended goal. That's what we'll be working to. So a high degree of making sure a broad range of those with a variety of income levels can live in the area. And then again, early delivery of land to accelerate the affordable housing. We've talked a good bit here about the 155 million for new community stabilization, and that it is unique, honestly, first that we could find of its kind, where it's a community-led fund that actually governs and makes the decisions on how the money is spent, along with 7.5 million early to address goals so we can get going on the goals of community stabilization and job creation. And then leadership in sustainability and resilience is a hallmark, really important part of this project. As you've heard, 15 acres of parks and open space, a district utility systems that does all kinds of things like catch rain and work with solar and also with thermal processes. The goal is to have zero net new greenhouse gas emissions over the whole project, the millions of square feet of this project. So it's a very ambitious goal. And then as Eric was mentioning, 30 million for transportation, and then additional ecological enhancements and historic preservation, with the far right column pointing out the 200 million community benefits fund, or sorry, the community benefits amount. Next slide, please. And then there is one more resource that we wanted to mention. If you go to G as in google.co/San Jose, is a website from Google with a ton of resources, but there is a new element there discussing the Downtown West Social Infrastructure Plan, which many of you have heard about, and this is a way to lay it out in pictures. And all of this is available in multiple languages. With that, I want to, again, thank you for your patience and listening, and want to turn this back to Dave or Lori for next steps.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Yeah, so in terms of next steps, you all have heard throughout this presentation that moving forward, there will be an online comment form available for you all to continue to give feedback after this meeting, leading to the Planning Commission and City Council meetings coming up. And that's at diridonsj.org/Downtown West DA, and that's where all the information is housed. As we typically do, we'll summarize all the information from this meeting and previous meetings. We recently had a meeting with the Station Advisory Group as well. And that will move forward into the staff report for the Planning Commission, and that meeting is planned on April 28th. And then tentatively, there's also a meeting with City Council planned for May 25th. So definitely stay tuned for that. I believe I said April 25th, but April 28th is the Planning Commission meeting, if I said that incorrectly. So just wanted to make sure you all are aware of that moving forward and where this process is moving from here. So now we are at the stage where we want to hear from you all. Again, the most important part of this today's event here. So before we do that, and I want to give a chance for folks to kind of do the hand raise, I want to ask if there are any Spanish speakers, and we do have the Spanish interpretation room open right now. And if there are folks that are Spanish speakers that would like to be in a group that's facilitated exclusively in Spanish, I would like to ask for them to use the raise hand feature, which is, you'll see a raise hand at the bottom of your screen and or in the participant window. If you could use that feature now to use the hand raise, that way we can set you up in the right room. Just going to give just 30 seconds here to see if anyone wants to take advantage of that resource. I see one, Gabrielle. Sonia, great, thank you. Just going to wait a couple more seconds here. Behind the scenes, our team is going to be moving folks into those rooms to make sure that they're set up correctly. Excellent. And then one other resource we do have available as well is in a different room, room 5. We do have availability for a Vietnamese consecutive interpretation. So if there are folks that are joining us that would like someone there to help ask questions to the team in Vietnamese, that resource is also available. So I'd like to ask folks that are hearing us through that channel if they could also use the raise hand feature to let us know if they'd like to be put in that room. And I'm just going to wait a couple seconds here to see if anyone needs that resource. Okay, it doesn't look like they do, and you still have the opportunity to do that as I transition here to the next slide. So as we mentioned earlier, we're going to have about 45 minutes to have a discussion with you all in these small groups, and we're trying to keep the groups approximately to about 12 participants. You'll see members of the project team there. You'll have a meeting facilitator, you'll have someone taking notes, and you'll also have resources from city staff there to help kind of navigate the process. We're going to hope to kind of have the discussion more between you all as participants and the facilitator, and then we'll come back and do a report out and answer any remaining questions that you might have. Folks from the Google team and city staff are really there to help observe. We're going to be asking 3 main questions. Obviously, it's open for discussion, but the questions that we're hoping to ask is kind of what you thought overall. There's a lot of information shared. We want to give you a chance to react to that and give us your feedback. Also, what types of strategies, programs, or outcomes would you prioritize to support job readiness and community stabilization using that early payment that Nancy mentioned, something to think about as well. And your thoughts on fund concept, including the third-party manager structure and the composition of the Community Advisory Committee. So just questions, prompts we want to kind of put out there for you to think about. And again, your meeting facilitator or group facilitator will walk you through those and give you plenty of opportunity to give feedback. I want to note that we are going to do it through hand raise feature, just so that we can kind of keep the discussion somewhat organized. And we're going to mute all mics. And as we move in, we'll ask you to use the raise hand feature again at the bottom of your window, and the facilitator will unmute you when it's your turn to speak. And we ask again, as always, to please keep your comments civil and respectful. And hopefully we'll have a great discussion with you all. And then at the end, after 45 minutes, we're going to come back here, do a quick report out, get a synopsis of all the conversation that we had in the small groups, and then we'll do a quick wrap up and send you all on your way. So, James, I hope I stalled enough to give you a chance to set up the small groups. If you want to give me the thumbs up, we're going to go ahead and transition right in. There's a thumbs up. Okay, so you all should be seeing something pop up on your screen right now that'll move you to those small groups, and we'll see you all back here after the discussion. See you soon. Hi all, welcome back. Thank you so much for sticking with us and the great discussion. We're going to wait for everyone to come back with us here in this main room. And we're going to do a quick round of kind of round robin report out so we can hear from everyone, from the meeting facilitators of what was discussed in all the other rooms, get a quick high level understanding of the discussion that was had today. And just as a reminder, everything that we discussed here today with each other was recorded as well. Or we had meeting note takers that they're taking those notes, and we'll create a summary of this meeting as well. So I think we have close to everyone hopefully back with us in this room now. And I know we did a quick shift of facilitators as we moved into the small groups, but I think we still had them pretty well consistent. So I'm going to just go down the line here and ask each one of the meeting facilitators to give us literally just a 1-minute synopsis of the discussion that was had, a high level key themes. And then we will do a quick wrap up and send you on your way here fairly close to noon. So I'm going to start with Olivia, who did group 1. Olivia, you should be able to unmute yourself, I hope.
Yes, I am.
Great.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, well, on our group, for question number 1, it was more about, you know, we got a lot of feedback about the good first step. It's a packet change for Google, and then then also there was also that came up a lot. We know that immigrant communities are having difficulties paying rent and not working, and they would like to see a plan where they like to see a plan where the terms of tech and transportation, and they also said that we're hopeful that the first promises of the fund will support us. I also heard that they wanted to make sure the immigrants' families will get also opportunities to have access to the resources, especially the undocumented families. It said that it looks all good, but make sure we listen to different experience about how the funding is distributed. There are instances where when big fund it's given, and those most in need don't get the support. And then what else? Sorry. About the 7.5 million funds, they were saying that they were like to see more information about that vaccine. There's not a whole lot of information, especially with the Latino folks, not a lot of information about the vaccine, and they would like to see some programs about that. And then
Olivia, that's great. We don't have to go through every single one, but that was excellent as a quick kind of synopsis. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Sounds like a great discussion. Next, we'll go to Matt. Matt, you were in group 2. Do you want to give us a quick synopsis there?
Yeah, thank you. We had a good conversation with pretty full participation, which was nice. Overall, just positive appreciation for the process, the community engagement process from Google side of things and from the city side of things. I think there's a little bit of concern about parks and public space, that like everybody's going to be able to have equitable access to those spaces and not be kind of excluded. That was a concern. And then also maintenance for some of those park spaces was a concern too. We did for the second question on the 7.5 million, legal services for tenants was a really, really big priority for our group, especially with eviction moratoriums probably expiring soon, and that, you know, is going to be a big issue. And so community land trust was also referenced there a couple of times. And then finally, yeah, just real appreciation for the community fund, and folks think that's the right way to go for the governance of that.
Great, thank you so much, Matt. Next, we're going to go to Dotu. If you want to give a quick synopsis of your group.
Yeah, hi everyone. So yeah, just overall, we had some wonderful contributions from those who participated, but yeah, everyone liked that there was a community sort of centric focus on the program. People had concerns around accessibility for those from disabled spaces, and also for those accessibility and equity amongst the transportation plan and providing access to those who will utilize the area. Yeah, there was also concerns over the park space being low. But overall, definitely we're leading towards, you know, what sort of ways can we continue to empower the community and keep, you know, the socioeconomic composition of the community intact while also providing opportunity. So, yeah, definitely.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dotu. Next, we'll go to Steve, who is facilitating the next group.
We had a terrific, very dynamic conversation, similar to other comments. One in particular, two in particular, Google is the elephant in the room, and let's not forget about other issues facing the city, particularly due to regarding sustainability. Not overlooking the cultural significance of the citizens of the city. And then something that was kind of new, the idea that there is some speculation in purchasing in the neighborhoods going on currently, and that might be pricing people out prematurely.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve. And last but not least, we'll go to Andrea. Andrea?
Hi, Dave. Thank you. Yeah, also great conversations in our group. A lot of questions specifically around like the committee and checks and balances and the city's role and Google's role within that committee. In terms of priorities for the first early payment, similar to what some of the other groups said, legal intervention for tenants was a big priority that came up, as well as community land trusts. And opportunities to have collective ownership for the community, and then tenant education and organizing, as well as starting to reach out to community quickly or now in terms of education around potential job opportunities or training. And then I think that's about it. Yeah, a lot of questions, but really also a lot of praise in terms of the process, community engagement process, and also the ability for the community to be at the forefront of the stabilization fund.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Andrea. And again, a huge thanks to the community partners, Olivia, Matt, Dotu, Steve, Andrea. You all represent different amazing groups within the community, and you're a great extension of city staff and the project team throughout this process to make sure voices are heard. So we really appreciate your time and effort in making that happen. And again, thank you all community members for being part of this meeting with us today. Really, really great to hear from you all. An extremely important milestone. So real quickly, I just wanted to take us through a couple wrap-up steps here, and then I might turn it back over to city staff if there's any final thoughts. But just as a reminder, hopefully you all can see my screen. There is a comment form available on the project website. We would like to direct you to, if you have any other further comments or questions, please go there, and you could pose them there. Again, it's diridonsj.org/downtown-west-DA. Downtown West DA is obviously also where all the information was also housed about this process, and all the information that we're gathering throughout these meetings will also be housed there as well. Next big meeting coming up, again, Planning Commission on April 28th, followed by a tentative date of May 25th for the City Council hearing. So just want to make sure we reiterate that. And again, a plug for the project website. All the recordings, all of the presentations, all they're posted now in multiple languages. Draft plans related to everything Diridon there as well, including the Affordable Housing Implementation Plan, obviously the Downtown West Project, and the draft DSAP. So we really encourage you to go there to learn more. And obviously you can continue to sign up for email updates if you haven't already. As Nancy mentioned, more great information on Google's website at g.co/San Jose. And finally, I'm sure you all know Lori well. If you have any final comments or questions, definitely feel free to email her at lori.severino@sanjoseca.gov. So with that, amazingly, we are right at noon. So somehow we timed this perfectly. I'm going to hand it back over to Nancy and team for any final thoughts.
I just really have been and continue to be grateful. The questions and the thoughtful comments throughout, and certainly today, continue to add, to continue to clarify and direct. So Thank you so much for your time and your thought and your passion. And as mentioned through the resources, we can get back to you with more information. And thank you so much for taking your time on a Saturday morning. Hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks all. Take care. Have a great rest of your day.